Actually, our topics today about the, is a quite historical and political background about the Kirkuk, which is one city of the Iraqi government. And my article title is the Kirkuk between being a Kurdish city and the democratic change in a Arabistani process in 20th century. If we are going to talk about that, I would like to, to explain the very brief, is a very short introduction about the topics. As everyone knows about the Kirkuk, is a city of Iraq, and then in after 2003, when the Iraqi government, Saddam Hussein, was destroyed by the USA, the demographic was has a very issues on the political problematic, and also the ethnicities at the same times. The Kirkuk is the ancient cities, and carry a lot of significant political battle between the southern, the Arabian and Persian, and also the Turkish Empire after, the collapsing Ottoman Empire in the beginning of 20th century. And then the most important issues that really attracted a political historian and a comment then of the writer of the other five about the ethnicity conflict between the Kurds and Arab and the Turkmen in a city. And also after the United States, when the Allied forces invaded in Iraq in 2003, the map of the Kirkuk was divided between the Iraqi government and the KRGs. Also, as the Article 140s, permanent constitution and provide for non-amalgamation of the process in between the of the ethnic group, and that if we're going to a bright eye view for this historical background, and we can call the historical claims. We know that Kurds people has ancient claim to the land and separating across in a modern Turkey, Syria, Iraq, and also the Iran, and also a traditional tribes. And then after the partitionated of the Ottoman Empire following the end of the First World War, the Kurdish land were divided among aforementioned to the ancient. That's why, the Kurdish claim to the land and encouraged them to the fight of the independence for that region, and eventually a land of the same autonomous region in north of Iraq, as we can see for today. And the return of the history of the Kirkuk has a, some of the minority like Kurds, Turk, and Turkmen, and the Arab. The population of this city, when the advanced, one of the researchers is talking about that on his book Turks, Kurd, and Arab about the Kirkuk, about 7,100 people is living in Kirkuk, and also some of the emerging democratic government in Iraq. We can, showing the workable and comparison among the diverse population to conflict in demanding while a procedure of the country, a national integrity. And the recent of if you're going back to the recent of the history for the Kirkuk, also we can see the following of the Arab and Turkmen into, bargaining oil industry, that the main issues for the city, as nowadays we can see the economic, political, and that bordering between the three countries, in between the Turks, Turkey, in Iraq government, and also the KRG in the south of Iraq. And that city and generated the following the Arab and Turkmen to, as we say, bargain for the oil economy industry. That process for the Arabization, namely the settling of the Iraqi Arabs in the city, and also to changing its demographic structure, continuing throughout with the region for the and monarchy. but was gradually actually, under Abbas regime of the Saddam Hussein introduction for the new and extremely a measure of the his destroyed Kurdish village and the forces deportation of their people to other, part of the Iraq under the we call the Anfal. That operation was started in 1980 until 1982. That operation was conflicting and destroying to exchange in a changing for the democracy of the Kirkuk. If you are looking about the human rights, was as a result when I'm assigning on my article, as a result, the Arabization policy, hundreds of the thousands of the Kurds and the Turkmen were forced to live in tents of several years, and many of them. And also, by the way, to this day, they're living in a poor condition, waiting to be restored to their old homes. That's why, for the Kurds, and this is they call the human rights issues. And if you look at, at the background ethnicity in the past and the present in Kirkuk, why the demanding by the Kurds, Turks, and the Arabs. For the Kurds, instead that the consequences for the Arabizations must be reserved by restarting for the Arabs, the prevention of the origin. Also, the primary in southern Iraq, they would restore to the Kurds their historical demographic is what. One of the Kurdish leader is a political leader, ethnicity past, and personally he said his name is Mahmoud Osman, and he believed that the Kurdish a member of the. He believed that the annexation of the Kirkuk to the Kurdish region is not meant to Kurdize it, and also he believed that the city, but to remove the results of Arabizations. From the 1959, the census has shown as a majority of Kurds in Kirkuk. That majority should be the solely certain in determining its futures. And for the why the Arab and the Turkmens the demanding for the Kirkuk in the past and the present president. The contract that Turkmen working closely with the Arabs argue that the Kirkuk is a predominator Turkmen city and should be remain part of unified of the Iraq. And the other issues of the city, when I'm talking about in my article, why they have so many demands by the other ethnicity or other minority in Kirkuk, the main problem and the main issues we can find that the economy in the city, that oil, because they call the first reachable cities in Iraq, or even we can say in the Middle East, because the oil, as we know, the first city, it can be argued that the rises ethnicities political was by no means invariable. This multilingual, that it long shared by the Arab, Turkish, and also the Kurdish-speaking communication transforming under the Ottoman and the British colonial role. And also, if you say, how the political economy of the oil shaped the cities, political in the 20th century, because that issues economy problematic is make a shapes for the city is not by minority or ethnicities living in a part in the city, but however, the oil and also his economic is make a shape for the city. By the way, as a Kirkuk has, this national a larger supply of the oil. Also, the Iraqis provide the oil service in more than 112 billion barrels. For example, make a 12% of the global oil supply for the country, and most of this service come from the Kirkuk, and thus the Kirkuk serves as a focal point of the environmental resources influence in this conflict. That conflict is exchanging a demographic of this city. If you can ask any solution or any solution to to make a solution for this problematic in a city. The federalism, the other one of the solutions, there is a concern agreement among most of Iraqi political groups about the establishment. Yes. Okay, yeah, all right. I'm sorry, because I'm sorry, I can't hear you properly. I don't know, maybe you. Hello?
Hello, sorry, yes. He said it just because we have a limited time here for each speaker, okay. And you should just skip to the conclusion part, yes.
All right, no problem. Just very shortly in my concluding, the research, I have some point for this, for this article and so. Yet, the first one is the demographic change and Arabisation process in Kirkuk 20th century occurred since establishment of Iraq in 1921, but the progress is slowly. And then the first step was started from 1963 and 1968. The government had showing more aggressive standing toward the Kirkuk issues, primarily to whips of the Kurds and revolutions activity in Kirkuk. And also nowadays it's important line. Who never had a control over the city will have a control over Baghdad. And finally, it's an important factor is to call and point the international attention towards the reality of Kirkuk, and then they encourage the Kurdish family who are originally from the Kirkuk to return their place as soon as normalizing process taking place. They make one along a lasting peace settlement between the ethnicity living in Kirkuk, between the equality between the Kurds, Turkmen, and the other Assyrian and Christian, they live in the Kirkuk. I'm concluding this a target of this article. If anybody have a question or any comment about my article and the question researcher, you are very welcome, and thank you so much for your listening.